Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abi.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
So recently I was sharing about the new Wim Hof. Well, it's not new, but I recently have been injecting the Wim Hof breathing method into my daily routine. And this morning I was doing it, and it's like you do these breaths, all these breaths, and then you exhale and you hold your breath for a certain amount of time. And I was up to 2 minutes of just sitting there, a little over 2 minutes. And they say, pause the video if you want to, and you can keep going longer after it. So I would hit pause on the video, right? And so I almost killed myself today. I almost accidentally assassinated myself. I went and I paused the video, and I was letting myself do a count, and I was at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And I got a text message from someone, and I was trying to respond to the text message, and I just kept holding my breath. And I forgot to breathe, and then all of a sudden everything started getting really blurry, and I was laying there oh my God, did I just kill, am I dying? At this moment, am I dying? And I tried to take and I took this big breath, and I really got scared. I was like, what if I can't breathe again?
What if I can't?
I thought in my head, did I break something? I don't know why it's so funny to me, but I literally thought, did I break something?
Did I break my breather by holding my breath too long?
Did I break my brain? Maybe I broke my brain completely and I won't recover.
My favorite is how much you're losing your mind telling this story.
It's so absurd, I think, but because the oxygen is so gone from your brain, you start making these delusional thoughts about it's like you're gone. I'm just done forever.
Oh my God.
I think I literally convinced myself I might actually die in this moment. No one's joking me. My body will naturally start to breathe even if I pass out.
I'm dying.
It was unbelievable. I'm the absurd things and I wonder if that's what happens on planes. When planes are maybe going down and oxygen loss starts happening, then people start going mad and saying all the darkest secrets. They're like, oh my God, did I do this? If they're just their brain just gave up and all their mouths just started spewing. And then they go, why would I say all that? Why did I think all that?
This is how me and you are different, because if I got a text, I would just accidentally breathe. I'd forget to hold my breath.
No, I was really, I'm determined to get to 10 minutes.
10 minutes?
5 to 10 minutes. I don't know what the human world record is for it, but I'm determined to set a record. I'm I want to be able to hold my breath longer than anyone else. I think one of my friends can deep dive and go without a breath for
5 minutes, maybe
5 to 10 minutes, somewhere in that range.
So
I don't know what the record is.
grow those lung muscles.
Yeah,
sexy lung muscles.
Sexy
then
lung
you'll be
muscles.
I can impress all the ladies with my sexy lung muscles.
I only need to impress one sexy lady with all these lung muscles.
Yeah.
And I love my mom so much, and she's already impressed with me. So done.
That's amazing.
So today,
that was a good intro.
That was.
I enjoyed it.
So today we're on. We said that we want to be visiting conversations about faith a little bit more in this season. And we've had dialogues around our Christian faith, and that spills over into other religious contexts, because I think that religion itself, we defined before, for us when we talk about being religious or religion, it's more or less a system of rules that we are living by to appease other people for the sake of rules rather than
or to please God for the sake of
or to appease God. Yeah. But it's more of a rule-based system when we talk about it in this connotation, because other people have a connotation. We want to, again, define religion because other people define that as something really good, that for them, religion is another way of them saying faith or connection, spirituality or stuff like that. But for the sake of that. And so for us, the talking about this spills over into
religion. Then would be like much more about performance. It would be kind of like having a boss who is just job reviewing everything you do without ever getting to know you, without there ever being compassion or empathy for why you needed a day off here or what you did here. So when we're talking about religion, it's very much a performance driven. You have to do everything right, or else there's really high stakes kind of view.
And that is something that transcends into all faith backgrounds.
Absolutely.
Where mankind has infiltrated our relationship with the Creator, with our need to perform and our disconnection from love and our attempt to return to that connection to love through our performance, our actions, our good deeds, our behavior patterns.
Yeah, there's so many religions out there based on the idea that if you do enough of the right things, you read enough, or you meditate enough, or you whatever,
pray enough, or sacrifice enough,
then you ascend. Then you become better than other people. And actually, most religions have a hierarchy system.
That's correct.
Which is the more you follow the rules and the better you follow the rules, then you get a higher up position. You get promoted higher up, and you become more special. And so there is a kind of a belief system of performing for a reward.
Right. And there's a lot that goes into this, but for us, even, addressing our Christian faith, which has been something that we've participated in heavily since we were children, that's something that we know about, that we understand that, and that we can have dialogues around that. And, even within our Christian faith system, there is a character seen as God named Jesus, who, apart from the Christian faith, has no hierarchy. Like inside of him, the context is he came to meet us face to face in a relational, non-hierarchical context. It says, you are in me and I am in you. We are one with each other.
Yeah, and he came to break the hierarchy system. I mean, the hierarchy system when he came was the Pharisees, which was the religious system. The more rules you follow, the better you do, the more
and
you
because
get
they
promoted.
They followed all the rules. They were special. They were better than all the underclass people.
Yes.
They got served in special ways, and they were very proud and arrogant about what they could accomplish in their own right.
Right.
Whereas this Jesus comes in and says, "Hey, that's nothing." He actually addresses them and says, "You're nothing but whitewashed tombs," which is a way of saying purified dead spaces.
Right. Yeah, and Jesus came to literally break the system of hierarchy. He came to back in that day, second class, because his mom got pregnant without being married. And so there was the second class mentality of she was a sinner. Yeah. And then
harlot, whore, whatever you might say. Like there was something very horrible about her being pregnant without being married.
Yeah. So he was born into what was considered a second class, lower class. And then definitely had went through his whole life, caring about the poor, caring about the people that no one noticed, promoting women, giving women a voice. So many of the things he said and spoke about broke hierarchy. The last shall be first, the first shall be last. He came to serve everyone. He empowered his disciples to learn to serve. They were worried. They kept thinking like, who's going to be greater and who's going to be better. And then their life began to be a life of serving the people.
Right.
And
initially the people of that time were looking for a savior or a Messiah that would rule physically on earth and overthrow all of the heavy, corrupt government that currently existed. Like they wanted to see a physical battle and a physical posture hold to free the people. And he was like, that's not even what I am. I'm not even here for that. I'm here to do something within the heart of you that will free your heart and your mind, regardless of whether you're slave or free, rich or poor. It will liberate you internally to actually live an abundant life, regardless of, whether or not you're locked up or you're running around free.
Yeah. So I think
Sorry, I interrupted that. And I think that was really good what you were saying about even his disciples, where they were
lower class.
They were lower class.
Well, some of them were like the tax collector. That's probably upper class.
Sure, but Matthew. They were lower class in the eyes of the people around them. They hated him. They loathed Matthew.
Oh, yeah.
He was a tax collector. He was someone who oppressed them. But he came and grabbed people who were lowly or loathed or not the popular crowd and said, hey, come join me and humble your hearts. And where there's a tenderizing process being around him of their relationship to judgment, their relationship to how they thought like freedom would come or who should be good or who should be justified or all of that stuff. And he challenged the fundamental belief systems in all of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's an interesting thing because in Christianity, it is a hierarchy system.
Exactly.
I learned the hierarchy system.
Hold on. Let me say with that.
Yeah.
So in agreement with that. So here you have Jesus, who's not hierarchical, but in the faith system, even that we have participated in and ascribed to, humanity, mankind, in our humanity, we've created a hierarchical system even in that. Out of the teachings of someone that says, hey, get out of it.
Yeah.
We create it. So we're first and foremost saying, hey, we've seen it inside of this religious context.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know how to, I literally sit and have so much compassion for pastors and for church systems because I don't know that I could do it better.
I don't think I could either.
Like on some level, whatever you value gets glorified and people then create hierarchy out of it.
Right.
So if
systems
there was a church,
and rules
I remember growing up, the church valued suffering. So the more you suffered, the more special you were.
Right.
And so like, it doesn't really matter. It's hard to create a system that doesn't create hierarchy. It's one of the cool things.
It's hard to create a system that doesn't have humans in it.
Right. One of the interesting things I've thought about often, I had a conversation with my friend the other day about this, is AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, is one of the systems I think that has done a good job of not creating a super huge hierarchy system. But it's because there isn't a leader that can become famous in it. And everybody who's in there is admitting that they have issues.
Right. They're honestly saying, I have brokenness.
Yeah. And then one of the core values is the humility and to own your stuff.
Right.
And to be honest. And then everybody is meant to be sponsoring someone and being sponsored. So there's this full circle of you can't grow the pyramid scheme and become like the best sponsor there ever was. I mean, I'm sure people can find ways to do it, but
I'm sure there's people inside of it that
the system has created less of a hierarchy movement.
Right.
And
there's a desire to acknowledge humanity and not promote,
not pretend to be better than you are, not like follow all the things perfectly, so that like there is such a value for authenticity in it and a need for ownership of your mistakes and your mess. I thought that was interesting. But so in the church, I'm like, I don't want there to be blame in the sense of, I have a lot of compassion. There isn't a way. I remember I was a pastor at a school here and loved doing it and all of my groups loved being in it, and it was very inspiring for a lot of them. But even with feeling like I had a really good core values, like love is a core value and vulnerability is a core value and taking care of each other is a core, like those things, even those then can become hierarchy.
Well, I think that you had people that even walked out of your group that went to other groups in their second years and were kind of like jackasses about it.
Absolutely,
like,
they were.
Well, this is nothing like what Abby facilitated.
We knew better than you.
And why are you doing things this way? And it was like there's still, we as humans,
hierarchy.
Yeah,
and I've seen that even in my Christian, as my journey has progressed. What can typically happen is you can decide that you are becoming more like, what's the word? Like, you're opened up or like elevated or what's the enlightened? That's what I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
You can be like, oh, I'm more enlightened now. And then you can look at the people who believe like you used to believe. And I see this happen all the time. It doesn't matter. Whatever new thing you're realizing about religion, you've decided that the people in the past who don't have that new revelation you have are now second-class citizens.
I think if you're truly having an encounter with the unfailing love of God, as you progressively have quote unquote enlightenment, that enlightenment is an understanding of compassion and grace. And it actually should produce humility where you're like, oh my gosh, I actually see how fundamentally broken I am and perfectly created I am, in the sense of I was made in my maker's image, and that's beautiful, and my humanity is really messy, and the more I understand love, the more messiness I can see in my own life. Therefore I alleviate my judgment of where others are at, and I can see myself inside of them rather than seeing all of their flaws and how much better I am.
Yeah, I was thinking about this because I've been on this journey of hierarchy and getting rid of judgment. And I remember having this thought of like, okay, so when I get rid of judgment, am I going to judge the judgmental Christians? Which is
something I've done.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is something I've been processing for like a few years.
Yeah.
Because I've been, the more I understand about compassion and just the gospel, like really that Jesus came for the broke. If it doesn't work for the addict and the homeless person and the person who is doing behaviors they don't want to do, if Jesus didn't come for us, then he didn't come for any of us. You know what I mean? So like, I really need to believe in a gospel where Jesus loves to be with us in the mess, which means I have to be okay with him being with me in the mess, and I have to be okay with him being with you in the mess. But the concept is, I was thinking about the more I've worked at understanding God's compassion, I have gotten frustrated at people who don't care about God's compassion.
And then I've lost my compassion towards them.
Totally. And it's human nature to want to judge them. And so I kind of have this picture in my head of a graph that is like, the trend is trending upwards, and it's like getting upwards. And I think that's what I believed religion was, is you ascend. And religion kind of teaches that, because it's like Christians are better than non-Christians. We need to separate from them. And then there's all of these rules, like this kind of sin is better than this kind of sin. So like if you're struggling with, if you get a divorce, that's worse than if you lied. We have all these rules. And so the idea in Christianity feels like you need to climb the stairs to get higher and higher. Yeah. But that also means that if you are climbing the stairs to get higher and higher, which is typically just the super disciplined personalities, then you get separated from humanity the farther you go, because then you're like, well, I would never do ... and I would never do ... And so my idea of maturity for so long was false. If you are getting to where you are less touchable with humans, where you relate less with the common humans and the common suffering, if that's happening, you have missed the whole point. And now when I think about it, I think the goal is wholeness.
Yeah.
And so wholeness means I'm not disassociated. So I am not in denial about me and my issues and what they're like, and I am present and I feel my own pain. And then I am but the reason why that's, if wholeness is the goal, not being a perfect Christian, not following all the rules, not being whatever, and everybody has their own definition of what they think God wants them to be in order for him to be happy. But if that's not the goal, if the goal is literally to work on wholeness, which the interesting thing is wholeness will keep you from doing a lot of behaviors, because you're like, oh, to do that behavior, I have to disassociate.
Right.
But as you're working towards wholeness, you start to feel pain more, which means you get closer to humanity. Because now when your friends are in pain, you're not looking down at them being like, why are you feeling this? You're like, oh, I know, I feel this with you. When you are getting more towards wholeness, you see your own humanity more accurately. Like you're not in denial about how good you are or whatever.
Right.
And you're not in shame about how bad you are. Wholeness doesn't mean you have shame in you. Because I think it's typically in Christianity, it's either you feel like you're really good because you can perform well, or you feel like you're a horrible piece of shit because you're nothing and you're not worthy. And neither of those are godly perspectives.
No.
And both of them are narcissistic.
Very much so.
And so in my idea of wholeness, I'm sorry, I'm almost done, but
you're good.
In my idea of wholeness, it's like, I think about Paul Young, and the more whole he got, his maturity led him to have more compassion for people, led him to feel more pain. Now he's in pain because now when people suffer around him, he actually feels that with them.
Right.
And so now he's closer to humanity than he was when he was disassociated and following all the religious rules. And that's what I see happening in me, where the more humility I have and the more compassion I have, the closer I get to being in the same boat with everyone else.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was thinking of, Matthew McConaughey in his book Green Lights, which I think is like one of the best man books ever written for masculinity, and femininity gets something out of it too. But there's something about the invitation into the masculine journey, and it's interesting because he shares his story through a lens that really lacks any self-judgment. He's just like, and this is just what it was. And I guess that dad did this and I responded this way. And then I made these decisions and the cops found me naked in my house, beating bongos, and hauled me out of my house. But there's this beauty of how he tells his story, not with this thing of like, oh, I was so terrible, I can't believe.
I was so great.
Or I was so great. It was just like, that was part of my journey. And I realized I was bankrupt at some level and needed to go on a spiritual journey to reconnect to myself. And it just is what it is. And I like that. I like the idea that we could look at our lives without the lens of judgment and be investigative and just go, yeah, I am human. They're human. We're messy. We're not better than each other. I can see me and someone else.
Well, it's a lot like what Jesus talked about. He's like, if you have lusted after your neighbor's wife, it's like you've committed adultery. If you have hate in your heart towards someone, it's like you've committed murder. I mean, I'm butchering how he said it.
Sure.
He said it much better. But the concept was he was leveling the playing field. He's like, actually on the inside, we all have the propensity to be able to have thoughts, and just because one person, and I think there's beauty in self-control. Listen, it's wonderful to have a thought and not follow through with it. But the concept of being able to understand that there is a propensity we all have towards, and I don't say towards evil, I say we all have a propensity towards avoiding pain and trying to get love in a way that feels safe to us.
Right.
And so sometimes the way we avoid pain or try to get love can be really dysfunctional.
Yep. And very devastating and destructive.
But if I look at it like I have that same propensity in me. I may not have done the same things you did to get love, but I actually have the same need in me.
Yes.
Whether my coping mechanism looks prettier or not.
And could make the same, we all have the same possibility inside of us to make the same exact destructive decisions.
Oh, yeah.
Given the right
circumstances.
We can all find ourselves in that space. I think also, in him leveling the playing field, he was like, look, I'm speaking directly into humanity's pride and their arrogance. And he's saying, look, you can sit and try and perform your actions externally to make you feel better than other people. But how are you any different? Like, it's still there. It's inside of your heart. You might not be acting on it, but it's like, no, you have to come to terms with it's in me. What is in me that I am denying the reality of it so that I can feel better about myself than other people. Yeah.
There's the song, Oh, How He Loves Us, that came out years and years and years ago. We played it at our wedding.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites. But there's a line in it that says, if grace is an ocean, we're all sinking. And it's one of my all-time favorite lines of any song, because I actually always visualize this, that all of humanity's in the middle of the ocean. And there's not one person that can put themselves up higher above the water.
Right.
There's nothing to stand on. Like none
Right.
of the humans can be like, I need less of this ocean of grace than you do. Like we're all in the middle of the water. Like the most you could do is like try to tread water higher, but you can't really. And so the concept of like, we all need grace is such a beautiful concept. Like there's not one person who needs less grace than the other person. Mm-hmm. What are you feeling over there?
Oh, she's commenting on my eyes tearing up. Mm-hmm. I just feel so connected to grace. The idea that it's like in all of the places that I held my judgments towards the world to protect myself, and all the places that I tried to be good enough, to be worthy enough of love. And when I came to the end of myself, that's where grace was looking at me in the face going, I love you as you are. And I see you in all the ways that you can't like, and I started thinking about all the places where I'm like, I can't fix myself. Mm-hmm. I can't, I don't even know how we kept this marriage together except for grace, the grace of heaven, the interaction of love that interrupted all of our brokenness and said, yeah, I see you. I love you. I'm going to be with you. And I'm going to put back together what life shattered, what you may have shattered yourself through your own actions. And I just think it's so beautiful. Like I can hear the song playing in my head and I'm getting wrecked by it. Sorry.
I love it. It's very, it's so liberating to just own how screwed up we are. I wish that everybody could do it. I was just in a session where I was counseling some people.
I think I wanted to say something to keep that counseling people. Okay. When you talked about owning how screwed up we are, there are people that own how screwed up they are through a shaming, condemning way. Yeah. Like, I'm so messed up. No one could ever love me. Mm-hmm. And when Abby talks about that, owning how screwed up we are or messed up we are, it's not from a condemning way. It's just like, wow, that's real. It's true. An acknowledgement of that is really messy. Mm-hmm. I'm just really broken. I really need an encounter with love. Look at that. Yeah. Shame is such a booger. It steals our ability to get what we need so much. Somebody will probably quote me on that and set that on Instagram. Shame is such a booger. Abby Stumball. But what it does is it makes us not want to admit that we actually are screwed up. Mm-hmm. And then it also makes us, if we admit it, then like drown in that we're screwed up. And it's funny because at the same time, shame doesn't want us to admit how beautifully and wonderfully we're created at the same time. Mm-hmm. Like it keeps us in this very defined box. Like I can sit in the tension of, man, I'm such a mess. And then also live within the truth and tension of, I am a beautiful and wonderful creation. There's value to my creation and how God created me at the core of who I am. I am wonderfully made. And no matter how many bad decisions I make, no matter how many times I fail, no matter how much is going on, there's actually a stamp of God inside my like DNA, inside my very being and essence that doesn't ever get blotted out. Mm-hmm. There's actually like, I am made in his image. At my worst, there is still a part of me that is made in his image. Even if we're not seeing it tangibly expressed or reflected at all. And a lot of our reflection of it, the things that we're reflecting as dark, destructive behavior, somewhere deep at the core is that DNA of love. Yeah. Yeah. And the most beautiful thing has been when I'm able to be like, I actually... In the Bible, there's this verse where Jesus talks about how everyone's righteous, their righteous acts are like, now this is not filthy rags, like their best righteous acts are like filthy rags. Man, I'm butchering the Bible today, but don't all write into me. I know the real verse and I can quote it on another day. But when I grew up, my pastor used to always say that Jesus was comparing our righteous acts like minstrel rags. Gross. But that was just a side note of the things I learned. But this idea of there's been nothing better than to feel like I'm loved and adored and chosen and fought for when I'm
doing great and when I'm doing horrible and when I'm really messy and when I feel, I'm so aware that pain really drives us to do crazy things. Even in our own marriage, when we talk about places that you had rage, why did you have rage? Because you had pain, you had fear, you had trauma. It was never because that was actually
who I was,
who you were. Mm-hmm. And so when I recognize, like, most of the time, the places where I'm not who I want to be, it's because there's pain there that I don't know what to do with. And there's pain there that I haven't learned how to get through. And so the idea of allowing God to love me before any of my pain is fixed and sorted and healed. And I think so many Christians are trying to become perfect so that God will love them.
Right.
Instead of recognizing the way that we get healed and transformed the most is when we let his love into that place that we think is unlovable. Mm-hmm. I remember working with this guy who's struggling with a porn addiction. And I was like, okay, the next time you look at porn, I want you to invite God to come love you right then. Mm-hmm. Because we don't get better by feeling loved when we behave perfectly.
Right.
All that does is reinforce performance.
Right.
When we feel the most aware of our need for a savior and we feel so loved there, that's what transforms us.
Right. And it heals us from the abandonment mm-hmm. that perpetuated the destruction in the first place. Because inside of the human experience is this deep sense of abandonment. When we're in relationship with shame and condemnation towards ourselves, we say this, I am unlovable. I am unworthy. That sense of abandonment kicks in. Mm-hmm. And so it continues to be perpetuated. Then we make more destructive measures because we don't see any value to our lives anyways. Mm-hmm. We don't see a way out. But when we invite love in the midst of destructive decision making, that's when the abandonment starts getting healed, because love met me mm-hmm. where I felt most alone is what mm-hmm. starts happening in the human soul.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I think that's why I tell people to not avoid the things that make them feel unlovable. I mean, even with other people, like, I want to share the things that I think are unlovable, because that's when love transforms me the most. When somebody loves me when I think I'm unlovable. Mm-hmm. And that's when God's love transforms me the most, is when I let him love me. And I like, there's a couple, I love Chris Renzema right now. He's a great artist. So much of his lyrics feel so empowering to the love of God in the midst of our brokenness. What's his name? I was just thinking, Corey Asbury, his newest album feels so laced with that also, like the love of God that is not about how we can perform and get there. And I think it's so easy for us to project onto God what he's like and what he'll be like, and imagine him as strict and angry and mean and punishing, instead of somebody who really wants relationship. One
of the things that I have observed within the context of religion and within the institution, the Christian institution, is this need to medicate the truth of our experience through Bible verses and performance, and disconnect completely from the need for healing inside of this space. So what I'm trying to say is, I watch people where they either really judge their messiness or they deny that it even exists. They try and bury their past altogether and go, I'm not even going to look at that. Look, I've been saved by Jesus. I don't even want to go back here and look at any of this stuff. And now I'm a new creation. I just need to go out here and live this life and live this perfected life. And what they do is they sever themselves from their history of their being, and they actually perpetuate abandonment without, like, to me,
without meaning to. They don't understand that they're doing that
without meaning to or understanding to. And a lot of them don't have value for, like, say, counseling or emotional healing, and they just say, well, let's just throw some more truth at it, rather than, oh no, there's parts of my historic being that needs rescuing. It needs the rescuing of the attention of forgiveness and love and gentleness and compassion and kindness throughout it. And so for me, one of the things that I spent years doing in this process was going back to my history, not through the lens of I'm here to bash Justin or think about how horrible this decision was, but to meet myself in the destructive decision making that was there and meet myself with a compassionate kindness and go, oh, I see why you did this. You felt so alone. Oh, I see why you did this. You felt so scared and you were trying to protect yourself. I love you. I understand you. And I began to meet myself with this nature, this Christ nature, this nature of love and kindness and patience and gentleness. And that's what liberated those parts of myself to more fully, I won't say fully, because I don't think I fully at all understand the love of God, but to
grow in awareness,
to more absorb and understand and be aware of the love of God and be affected by it through visiting those places.
Yeah, I think that what you're talking about is one of the flaws in a lot of the Christian religious circles, which is you just don't look at your past. You deny your past. It's gone. It's under the blood. It's under the cross. And I don't actually disagree with any of the concepts as in like, yeah, actually
that's forgiven.
Jesus came to forgive everything. And so there isn't actually accusation about that. But most of the times, having worked with a lot of people, there is a denial and there's a hatred almost like, well, that's who I used to be. I'm not that person anymore. And that's why you're saying it feels like abandonment.
That person.
Yeah, because anytime we still have anger or hatred or frustration towards a part of us, it still is a division inside of us, and that's not wholeness. And that's when I talk about the goal to be wholeness, which means I can allow God, I can look at my past and I can allow him into my past where actually his presence can come. And so many times we've had to walk with people to see in their worst moment, the moment that they felt so unlovable, the moment they got an abortion, or the moment they went back to the guy who's abusive, or the moment that they decided to cheat on their spouse. They actually need the love of God in that moment.
Right. To visit that moment, that history. They can't just
disassociate from that moment and say, that's no longer me. They actually need to see that God loved that part of them and for them to be able to forgive that part of them so that then they can move forward in wholeness into their future.
Right. And what happens is when people dissociate from their history based on these fundamental ideas. Yeah. Right. What they end up doing is you watch them move forward in their future, and then all of a sudden you see these big explosions where pastor cheats on wife, or pastor is visiting prostitutes, or whatever religious leader does this destructive thing, or they have this complete fallout of faith altogether, and they leave their connection to God seemingly, as they'd say it, and they just abandon it and go, it is all fake, I'm an atheist now. It's because something inside of them has been so neglected, and the screaming of that thing in their history is like, I need attention. I need to be taken care of. You don't understand. Love hasn't actually met me fully. You've just disconnected from me.
Well, you can only compartmentalize for so long
before the breakdown happens.
It's kind of like a dam wall. You can like build a wall and throw everything behind it until there's so much stuff behind it that it breaks the wall.
Yeah. And comes crumbling down.
Yeah.
And so there's this idea, as a side note, I've heard people criticize emotional health and been like, that's the new God, emotional health. And I'm like, no, actually it's not. It is the practical implementation of the nature of God meeting the human condition. It is the practical implementation of the love of God meeting the human condition. It is us getting present with our humanity and allowing those aspects of his love to come meet all the places of pain and loss and tragedy and destructive decision making. It is saying yes and fully engaging into that process that he's inviting us into. It's part of that relational experience. It's like with you and I, if I never shared any of my life with you, there wouldn't be a relationship. If I didn't let you, Abby, come look at some of my history and allow you to love on me in those places, like we'd have a very shallow relationship.
Yeah.
But in my vulnerability, I've allowed myself to be present with all parts of my life, and you've gotten to be part of every part of it. Even if you weren't there, when I was 5,
Totally.
you get to be part of it now. And there's this relationship building that happens, and then this healing and this redemption that happens through being able to visit those places rather than shut them off and act like it never existed.
Yeah. I think that there is this idea that we've seen a lot in Christianity of being separated from emotional health, like you were saying. And a lot of people are like, and I've seen the pain of this as a pastor, of the people who are like, well, they just told me to pray more. Well, they just told me to fast more. Well, they just told me to spend more time with God. Well, they just told me to do
Read my Bible more.
And they can't overcome whatever that it is that they're trying to overcome. And it can become so painful, so condemning,
daunting, disappointing.
Then you feel like I'm doing everything I can. It becomes hopeless.
Yeah.
It becomes overwhelming. And so there's this place where emotional intelligence actually empowers, Paul talks about, I do what I don't want to do. And there is this place where emotional...
Paul in the Bible.
Yeah, Paul in the Bible, yeah. And there's this place where emotional intelligence can help you actually begin to break down that battle inside of you and understand why you do what you don't want to do and understand where it comes from, so that then you can actually transform your behavior. And a lot of times in the church, and we talked about this before, it's easy for leaders to disassociate into just the spiritual aspects of life. And a holistic idea would be that there's the spiritual, and there's your soul, and there's your body. There's all three things matter. Yeah. Soul, including emotions. And it's one of the things I've liked a lot about where we're at. The church that we go to, has been a lot of teaching on the need to take care of your soul, not just your spirit. And that means like being aware of what's going on inside of you, being aware of what needs you're having, how to get those needs met healthily. Like I've seen so many Christians who hate themselves and feel like they're inherently evil just because they haven't had the emotional intelligence to be like, oh, actually, I keep running to men because there's this wound I have, and I can actually learn how to get that need met in a healthy way, and then I don't have to keep running over here. But sometimes in the church, the answer is just pray more, or just don't do it, or just say no to Satan, or whatever it is.
Totally.
And so we can be asking people to jump off cliffs and make it to the other side, when emotional intelligence can often provide just a pathway from the side to the side.
Can be the bridge.
It can be the bridge.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the reasons I know...
And I also don't want to glorify emotional intelligence, because all of our emotional intelligence still would not have gotten us healed without feeling like there was a spiritual.
Well, and I'll say this, that it is the practical implementation of the emotional intelligence that was partnered with my spiritual encounters. There were so many times in my brokenness where I was crying out to God saying, Papa, I need you, like speak to me. And he would speak something to my heart that for me internally, I was like, I am loved. I am not alone. And that in itself started healing something. Just that personal interaction was bringing healing. But also, many of the emotionally intelligent things that we talk about were nuggets that I heard, and even you heard, in our one-on-one experience. We didn't read it out of a book. There was so much of what we've done to help people that was birthed out of those spiritual encounters, where I would feel an internal unction say something like, hey, you need to ask this question, or, oh, this is going on. And then there would be an aha that happened for me. And it was actually truth that I feel came directly from my Creator, where in that, when implemented practically, changed the game for us.
Yeah.
And I also want to say, because I want to be a well-rounded person, a well-rounded individual. I always want to be a balanced person.
Totally.
I'm always doing a tug of war. Any environment you put me in, I'll find out what extreme they're in. I'll be the opposite to try and pull them to balance. But to me, it's like anything without a spiritual relational encounter with heaven is a form of empty, dead religion. And emotional health can be that. A level of it where it's like, yeah, I'm doing all the things and going through all the rules of emotional health. And without that connection to Creator, there's parts of that nature inside of it that will heal us, but it'll still end up feeling like an empty, dead religion of like, all right, I did the emotional health stuff, but I'm still not thriving.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I was actually just going to say this. Humans' propensity to make religion out of anything.
Politics.
Yeah. No, I was thinking food, politics, exercising, emotional intelligence, spirituality.
Yeah.
Whatever social cause that you have.
Totally.
Like the concept is we find a thing and we decide that we're better people for being better at the thing that we're doing than other people. Mm-hmm. Or we find a thing and we decide this is the goal and I'll be lovable if I achieve this. So all of the consultants I train, I just see it every time you teach people emotional health and it begins to be the God. Like, well, I need to be the healthiest and I need to be far along on this journey and I'm not lovable until I overcome all these things. And then those people, they don't even know any of this. And that ability to judge other people, that ability to create a hierarchy system, that ability to decide, that this is the thing that if everybody got this one thing, if everybody was a Republican, if everyone was a Democrat, if everyone, and we can create a system of belonging and judgment and rules out of anything we're doing in life, where now we feel condemnation if we're not eating perfectly every day, just organic or non-organic, breastfeeding or not breastfeeding, like people, because when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that was eating from the tree of judgment. Mm-hmm. So now it is a natural part to want to create systems of judgment. Yep. And so that's where there has to be compassion, because I watch so many people be like, screw the church. They're trying to control people, like who've been hurt. And both of me and you have been legitimately hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, we have story after story of crazy things that we've seen happen in church. And I don't know anybody who doesn't. But people will leave that and be like, they're just a system of da-da-da. But typically, they leave that system and find a new system.
Or they build their own system.
Yeah.
And they become the very thing that they've judged and they've hated and they replicate it. And yeah.
And it's okay. I'm not saying it's bad to separate from dysfunctional things, but to recognize the humility of, I still have the propensity to do the thing that I'm mad that they did.
Yeah. And I think that there's like, even for me, I've been able to walk away from religious institutions, expressing value systems within Christianity that I don't agree with. Mm-hmm. And I've been able to walk away and be like, oh, I don't agree at all with how you think of someone like the Westboro Baptist Church and how hateful they came out back in the day and stuff. I'm like, absolutely not, does not represent the God that I ascribe to. But at the same time, I have a compassion in my heart of like, oh, that's so sad. They feel so trapped there. And I could be them. I was raised in a religious environment. I get how they got there. And I can see my humanity in their humanity as well. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a thing of being able to, and that the great equalizer, if you can actually recognize that there are common human themes. And again, my heart would, okay, the analogy I was going to give, I'm taking back.
Rewind.
Like, it may not be my propensity to, I don't want to use anything to make, because I don't want to shame people. So I'm like, it may not be my propensity to be bulimic, because I literally can't make myself throw up. I wish I could. Sometimes, like when you eat something that you're allergic to and you just want to, it may not be my propensity to do that, but I actually have the propensity to want to perfect myself in areas that I feel imperfect, or I actually have the propensity to want to control something when my life feels out of control.
So you're using an example like bulimia, or you could use an example like a drug addiction, or anything that we're doing. You're like, yeah, I might not have a propensity to veer towards that expression of it, but my expression of control is over here. And I have a huge propensity to try and control this area. And it might just look different and more acceptable inside of culture, my actions.
Oh, I always say like my dysfunctions are much more acceptable. So like I may not have an addictive personality like drugs, alcohol, gambling, that kind of stuff. I don't have an addictive personality in that way. I do have an addictive personality to like codependency, fixing people, things like that. I had to work through a lot, or people pleasing, or whatever that stuff is.
Right, and that stuff you can look at and be like, oh, she's so wonderful. She just wants to help people.
Yeah.
Oh, she's so...
it's the pretty dysfunctions.
And it's this illusion of beauty and goodness.
Yep. Instead of like owning like, no, I actually understand addiction. You're trying to avoid pain and feel okay. I am doing the exact same thing in how I relate.
I just found a way to get away with it.
Yeah,
to be accepted.
It looks prettier.
Totally. And so I think that part of this conversation, that we're exploring is leveling the playing field. Like in order for people to go on the journey of healing and connecting to God, we're going to have to allow the playing field to be leveled and allow humility to have its way inside of us. And humility starts with the acknowledgement of our own humanity and our own capacity and propensity to the possibility of destructive nature. And I think that some people right now need to ask themselves, like, where in my life have I justified my destructive nature to make me feel better than other people?
Yeah.
Like, what in my world have I held on to that I think I'm so great for when, actually, I'm just performing over here, white knuckling it, and I'm not better than other people. And if there's places where you feel better than other people, it's not like, I have to hate myself for it, but it's like, maybe it's a time for me to acknowledge it and be open to the idea that I'm not.
Yeah. And I would challenge people, even with denial. I was meeting with a client this week, and you could tell like everybody thinks they're very kind and wonderful, but they also have this like deeper down anger, rage that comes out that just most people don't see. And I was like, yeah, let's just own that that's part of who you are. Like, it's not part of who you are forever, but let's just own that that's where you're at. And let's not try to hide from it. And then you can invite love in and have need for a savior to meet you there and have need for grace. Like, let's actually just own it. So if you're out there and you've denied a lot of your humanity, I think there's something so beautiful to be like, yeah, I want to control things. Yeah, I actually feel unsafe, and I am trying to do whatever I can to avoid myself. I'm trying to avoid feeling my own feelings. Let's just own that and invite love into those pockets.
I like to even I'm not trying to pick you apart. I'm thinking about like language and what it communicates. Part of who I am. I would say like it's time to acknowledge this is part of how I am.
Yeah.
And when I say that,
not
is like
who you are.
Who I am and how I am are two different things.
Absolutely.
And I think who I am is rooted back into a deeper truth in the Christ nature, where Jesus reveals the Father and says, actually, you're made in God's image. This is who you are. How you are may be completely different than who God is and the nature of who God is.
Inside of you.
Inside of you, at the core of your being. And we're trying to get our soul back to where our spirit is. We're trying to actually allow love to penetrate all the parts of our soul, that our soul would be refined, redeemed, healed, set free until it aligns with the truth of who we are. And so I think it's time to ask, how am I? What parts of me, what are the parts of me of how I actually act? Okay, I'm going to get honest with how I behave, how I respond, how I think, and I'm going to allow this to be a sobering time.
Yeah.
A time where I settle in and I stop lying to myself. And I ask myself, if I can't get honest in those ways, what am I scared of? What is the monsters that are holding me back with getting honest with how I am?
One of the things I want to challenge is two different groups of people. One is the group of people inside the church that has judged people that have walked away from the church, and has created a hierarchy, like, I'm better than you because haven't walked away. I haven't done that. And the ability to have empathy for people who have been hurt and been devastated and have felt that. And we're going to talk about that, why church hurt happens and why people need to walk away and the pain of that. And then the other group is people who've walked away, who judge anybody who is a part of a church or who judges churches harshly. And the empathy and humility to be like, okay, is there another place that I'm creating a new system of judgment for me, even though I'm out of that one? How do I have the same propensity for needing love and safety and security the same way that the church did? Because what we're really looking for is creating a place where whatever journey you're at on your faith journey, that you could have empathy and understanding for the people around you and not decide that you're better than them or more enlightened than them, but just that you're at where you're at because of how your life has unfolded and the choices you've made. Yeah.
So hopefully you guys are enjoying this, some of this conversation, and it's opening your hearts up to find more freedom, more wholeness especially in this journey of really humility. That's a really big part of this conversation. And that invitation to humility can sometimes feel really scary because it comes with a lot of honesty inside of our life. And, but we know the fruit of it is awesome. It feels so liberating and freeing.
Yeah. Letting love into the places where you need love the most is one of the most healing things you can do.
Totally. So with that, if you got anything out of this episode, rate, review, subscribe, and share. Tell your friends about it. Yep. And we're looking forward to more journeys in talking about faith throughout the coming time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now I'm going to go assassinate myself through a breathing technique. I can't believe that. That was so funny.
That's the best. You're the best. You're cute.
Bye now.